All right, in this video, we're going to cover the topics in Lab 3, where we jog the robot using both jog mode and world mode. To do so, we're going to make sure that our teach pennant is enabled. So that's this little key here. If you toggle that switch, it'll toggle between off and on. Off means the teach pennant is disabled. On means the teach pennant is enabled and can be used. Up here in our status window, we can see that our robot is in joint mode. That means that the robot is going to move via its individual or independent joints. Those joints, as far as the motion, is located here on the right-hand side. So you have joint 1 in the negative direction, joint 1 in the positive direction, joint 2 in the negative, joint 2 in the positive, and so on up to joint 6 in the negative and joint 6 in the positive. This is a 6-axis robot, meaning it has 6 joints or 6 motors controlling its 6 degrees of freedom. And that's what these buttons, the J1 through J6, correspond to here. In order to get the robot to move, we'd go ahead and hit up here in this upper right-hand corner, we have our speed. So we'd probably want to bring our speed down. So I'm going to go ahead and click this down arrow till I get to 50. We can also hit the shift or latch the shift key and then hit this down in order to make a much larger change in the speed. Okay, now also with holding the shift down or with latching the shift, now I can go ahead and move these joints in any direction I want. As long as the button is depressed or latched, if I press it once with my cursor, it latches that key and that joint will continue to move until I click it again to unlatch it. On the actual teach pennant, as long as you're holding it down, it continues to move. Okay, so there's joint 1, joint 2, and then joint 3. So in the lab, it asks you to move the pointer on the robot to a pointer on the table. Since we don't really have a pointer on the table, all I'm going to ask is that in the assessment that you be able to move it so that you can move it, show me that you're able to move it around in different directions. Now, if we wanted to change that to a world mode, that's a different style of motion for the robot. So this is, in joint mode, we've been moving the motors or the joints independently. In world mode, it's a coordinated motion. And so by clicking that coordinate button, it changes our mode of motion to the different options. The one that we're seeking for this one is world. Now by hitting shift, instead of moving just joint 1, it moves in the positive X direction. So this positive X direction is shown here by this red axis shown on the end of our arm tool. And then the green would represent the positive Y direction and the blue the positive Z direction. So the negative in either of those different directions would just be the opposite. So negative Y would be going opposite of the direction which this red points, so it would be going backwards. Negative Y would be going here to the left instead of the right, and then negative Z would be going downward instead of upward. So let's go ahead and move it in a positive X. Okay, so robot moves forward. We'll go back. Now we'll move in the positive Y, and then go back. And then the positive Z, and then we'll go back. Now these ones down here are actually rotations about each of those axes. So as I go in the positive X rotation, what it means is the robot about this point is going to rotate about this axis. So let's see what that looks like. Okay, and then we'll go back. Now if you notice, there's multiple joints that are moving in a coordinated fashion in order to make that move. So we're taking the center of that robotic faceplate, and rotating it about that axis. And it's keeping that center right on that axis. In order to do that, it's having to move multiple motors or joints at the same time. So for Y, it's going to move about that Y axis. And then Z, it's just going to move about that center axis. So not much to see there because all it has to do is move that faceplate. Okay, so that's the conclusion of our lab 3, is just moving the robot in both of those different modes of motion, the joint and the world.